What's going on, everybody? Excited to be back here with another Bears breakdown as we're going to go through the Chicago Bears performance against the Green Bay Packers, which, look, you probably don't need me to tell you this, but it wasn't exactly strong. Even so, we're going to go through the game because why wouldn't we? We're Bears fans, and it's weird being back to you after a bye week. I feel like I haven't talked to y'all in like quite some time. I certainly hope that you had a fun and safe Thanksgiving in whatever in whatever way that you wanted to be. And honestly, DJ, you're talking about how somebody in the chat's talking about how they religiously watch the games and they stopped watching at halftime on this one. I'll tell you what, first of all, I don't blame you. Second of all, to any other Bears fans that might have done the same, know that I forgive you and that you shouldn't wear any shame, because believe it or not, if you take a look at ESPN's win percentage projector, the Bears were down at a 4% chance of winning at the moment that the fumble return got scored against them, and the score was 3-27. So not a great showing for Chicago in any sense of the imagination. A huge bummer of a game overall. But yeah, let's take a look at it. So the biggest problem that I think ultimately came to define the Bears today was that they really weren't able to stop the Green Bay offense. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the first play of the game for Green Bay is actually not a bad representation of what's going on, because basically what they did was they used play action all the time. They used play action pretty much constantly and used it to throw off the Bears pass rush. So as you guys probably know, the Bears didn't exactly have a great day rushing the passer. Also, let me go ahead and get in case you guys have wondered what I use for drawing stuff, it's a Mac app that I found called ScreenBrush. It looks like it's not initiated yet, so let's go ahead and pull that up. But so yeah, Akusai, it's funny. Akeem Hicks has quite a bit of it, but now that we've got this rolling perfect, we've got it working. So as you know, the Bears pass rush wasn't exactly ferocious on Sunday, but a lot of it's because the Packers were able to effectively use play action to neuter the Bears pass rush and keep them on their toes while still threatening with Aaron Jones. They were truly the dynamic offense that we've kind of always wanted to be. And then, Chris, they started doing exactly what you're talking about, but we'll get there when we get there. One thing I thought was an impressive way to start the game was a play action pass that just gets the ball out right there. And sure, you could talk about how it's a screen, but really, the Bears wanted to test the defensive back's ability to tackle, and if y'all saw what I saw, the defensive backs actually struggled to follow suit. They struggled to come downhill and make a lot of the tackles that we've seen them make in the past, and it hurt the Bears pretty much all night. Another thing that really hurt the Bears was that so we'll talk about the run game in just a little bit, but one of the things that I really saw was that on third downs in particular, the Bears played a lot of man coverage. So as you'll see right here, the Bears line up in what feels like a very, very flat coverage with Roquan Smith very clearly trailing Jones out here wide. This is as clear a signal as it gets that Jalen's in press. I think that's Jackson is in press coverage, and Screen over here is in press coverage on Davante Adams. That's its own question. And then you've got Kyle Fuller in his usual off-man coverage with, believe it or not, Deion Bush playing the deep safety. But the point is, the Bears and Chuck Pagano did this pretty much all night long as far as their overall plan on third downs, and the Packers were able to victimize it. I want you to keep an eye here on Jalen Johnson's man, because since they were using man coverage, the Packers were able to run sneaky little rub routes like this that separate Johnson from his man, like with this undercutting route. Rodgers distributed quickly, got the ball out fast, and he's able to turn up field and pick up a first down. Tight one, but picking up a first. And so Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack, it's funny you ask, Akusai, actually played a lot of coverage this evening. They didn't, or not on this one, or not on this specific play, but the Bears playing man ended up hurting them on a lot of these third down scenarios because it was their preferred method of coverage. Another thing that didn't help was that the Bears pass rush couldn't get home. So when they did stop the run, which was rare, frankly, but when they did stop the run and force the Packers into a setting, in this case, it's zone coverage, they actually So the Bears rush three guys, one of them being Mack, thankfully, but they drop Robert Quinn into deep coverage, and this is a Tampa 2 defense, just in case you didn't know. What that means is I want to walk you through what this setup is. This means that you've got both outside corners in short zones right here along the alley, with two deep safeties covering major points of the end zone, and a linebacker, in this case Danny Trevathan, covering this deep middle area. And the problem was, it's not that they didn't have things covered immediately, because they actually did. Like, Jackson's got his man covered, he's covered enough. Remember, it's 3rd and like 12, so they're trying to get to there at least, right? But so that what really hurt here is that Rodgers had, I think it was 6 seconds to make this play to Davante Adams, which there's just about no defense in the NFL that, at least against Aaron Rodgers, can give up this kind of time and still succeed in a coverage setting. I know that Danny Trevathan got hung out to dry. He did in many cases, and we'll go through exactly how that happened, because I think it's worth talking about. But like you're talking about, DJ, you can't give Aaron Rodgers time in the pocket. And I guess I could blame the fact that they rushed 3 guys, but also the Bears pass rushers just didn't get home. They haven't been as productive as we'd wanted them to be all year long, and today they really came home to roost, as Davante Adams is going to have a legitimately good idea to go take advantage of the space created by his teammate who's pulled Eddie Jackson out of his Tampa 2 zone, and Jalen Johnson is just not quick enough to recognize that Davante wants to run into that area. Davante actually, if you take a look here, hesitates right at that spot, leaving a ton of room for Aaron to throw into. It's a very savvy move, and then Aaron obviously completes a really nice pass into cover, or into that soft spot in the coverage, and the Packers score the first touchdown of the game. But so that's the thing. So Slim Jim just asked, was it that the defense was bad or that their offense was phenomenal? I don't want to sound like I'm trying to feed you sunshine. I saw a lot of the latter. I saw a really good offense that was victimizing the Bears where they could, and it didn't help anything that with Akeem Hicks gone, they could legitimately threaten just about however they wanted to. Let me get my play reference sheet pulled up, because there's so I want to show you an absolutely standard example pretty quickly of what exactly it looked like when the Packers ran the ball, because in many cases they were able to get very, very, very nice yardage, and it looks like this one should work. I think we will see, won't we? But so the Packers just came out with a really, really good game plan, and while this isn't the biggest gain of the day, I do think it shows just how well the Bears were able, just how well the Packers were able to block. And I'll find another example, because I'm not 100% certain that this is the one that I wanted to. Yeah, so this is much more of a run where I want to point out the damage that that playing the run did, because when the Packers did, the Packers basically ran all game long up the middle. And so they would go up the middle. Occasionally they'd run a stretch play. But right here, thank you so much for that donation. That is so kind of you, Could Be Mitch. One thing that I found really impressive was that at some point the Bears started cheating inside. You can see Buster Skrine here, who ought to be covering this outside lane. And Skrine, by the way, did not have a very good day. He cheats inside, and as soon as Aaron Jones sees that, he's going to take what should be an inside handoff with Danny Trevathan sitting in the lane and bounce it directly out. See, check that out. He's going to go straight for the sidelines. Mack can't get there even though he beat his man, and Jones is able to turn what ought to be almost no gain, or at least has been no gain for a good while, into 5 yards. See, take a look here. Note that Buster Skrine is the furthest guy on the outside. Don't count Kyle Fuller. He's in the backfield. And so when Mack cuts inside, he's doing his job, but Skrine is ending up in the same place as Mack, and that's problematic for the Bears, who effectively watch him get sealed as Jones bounces directly outside, takes advantage of a quick 5 yards. Not very good. So one other play, I've got to be able to find this thing. So let's see. Oh, it's this one, isn't it? So what a lot of the Packers' run game looked like throughout the rest of the game was much more like this. So I want you to pay attention to what the Packers line's about to do. This handoff is going to be much more like the one that I just mentioned. So you've already seen Buster Skrine get caught out on the side, but this is a handoff that's going to go directly up the middle. And if you notice, we've got John Jenkins, we've got Khalil Mack, we've got Roquan Smith, who's slightly easy to block, and then Gibson over here, who's about to come in on run support. And I want you to watch just how well the Packers are able to handle this, because once they pull Lazard in here to get the Bears to shift over, they have the ability to put two guys on Jenkins. Jenkins is his name. One guy on Mack, Lazard on Gibson, and if one of these guys can pull off the double team on Roquan, they've got everybody sealed. And take a look at just how well this works. Like beautiful offensive blocking, they get Jenkins out of the way, immediately paired up on his one-on-one. Roquan sealed with a lineman, and there's nothing he can do. Now he's taking on a tackle. Lazard cuts off Gibson perfectly, and Mack is held up just enough by his man. I think it was a tight end, such that when Jones continues the play and runs right into this hole, the only person there to stop him is Kyle Fuller. This was kind of the story of the game. The Packers just blocked everybody, it's funny because Akusai in the chat talks about how Bakhtiari definitely held. I haven't actually seen it yet. No, that's a holding call, but holding kind of doesn't exist in the modern NFL unless you're Charles Leno and you hold like crazy. But we'll get there in the offensive section, because I do think it's worth talking about the defense. What the Packers were able to do was just out of this world. They really they challenged the Bears defense on every level of what the Bears do. They continued to exploit exactly the matchups that they wanted all game long. Just about any play that I point to, there's going to be something that the Packers do really well. Like in this case, let me see. I think it's a pretty little fake. But let me check. Yes. Okay, so this was one of my favorite play designs of the day by the Packers. So what you're going to see is a fake outside zone handoff with a quick throw to Davante Adams that they make a play off of and get him in one-on-one space against Kyle Fuller. See, the motion man pulls everybody over. You've got the entire Bears defense shifting this way, and a quick throw out to Adams suddenly turns this into a one-on-one with tons and tons of space. This is very similar actually to what the Bears offense used to do in 2018, but they don't really tend to do stuff like this anymore, and I think part of it's because their run game isn't as effective as the Packers was, but this really hurt. But going back, one thing I didn't talk about, because I feel like I haven't emphasized this enough, going back to the Jones run, one thing that really, really hurt the Bears is that Akeem Hicks normally sits where John Jenkins is, and he's consistently able to occupy his man, let alone potentially two, and seeing the way that ENB, I know that I haven't, or that we haven't won a game since I did that hype video, which is a massive bummer, because I planned on doing that video. I had a feeling we weren't going to be undefeated at that point, but I didn't think we'd lose 5 games in a row. Even so, it's really worth mentioning that Akeem Hicks absolutely is the iron wall against the run game that the Bears defense has tended to hinge on, because when Akeem Hicks takes on blockers, he can often soak probably 2 of them, or at least play 2 gaps. With the Bears run defense the way that it is, if Danny Trevathan isn't over there to help, a lot of times things are relatively easy to block, and it hurts. And so it's something that hopefully will be fixed with Hicks's return. Certainly I don't think the Bears defense is quote-unquote so bad that they'll give up 41 points on a week-to-week basis, but it didn't help anything that on various key plays throughout the game, the Bears were willing, believe it or not, to even go as far as dropping both Mack and Quinn into deep coverage and just leaving them out there. And so they wouldn't even in that case rush the passer. Let me see. I think it is this one where that happened. There was definitely some weirdness in terms of Chuck Pagano's game plan. Yeah, this is the one. So what you're going to see here, because Rodgers had time in the pocket basically all day long. I want you to pay attention to Khalil Mack down here in the bottom and Robert Quinn over here, believe it or not, sitting in the slot, because both of these guys are going to drop off, and that's going to leave only the interior rushers and just 3 of them covering, like rushing the passer. And so when they do that, at first, believe it or not, everything's fairly well covered. I'll pause right here. So Buster Screens on his man, Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson have the deep droppers. Even Devontae Adams is covered by Robert Quinn. Everything's good at first, right? It's solid. With the problem here being that this only works if one of these 3 guys was able to get home. If they aren't able to get home, if they're not able to pressure Rodgers, he can just sit and wait. And eventually, I want you to keep your eye here on number 19. Dropping Mack into coverage is going to reap exactly what you sow, because 19 beats Mack across his face there in the middle, and Rodgers makes a play, throws the ball out to him, he turns it upfield and does what solid players in space do, breaks a tackle from none other than Robert Quinn, and picks up 15 yards on first down. A lot of this comes from Chuck Pagano trying to find creative ways to counter the Packers' empty set. This is what really killed the Bears, believe it or not, because with Jones on the field, they still had to leave Danny Trevathan in the game. In this case, I actually think this is a rare snap where he's out. But Pagano's trying to find ways to fluster Rodgers and keep the Bears out of the man situations that have been killing them up to this point. Of course, that doesn't work, because I want you to watch this play live and get a sense for just how long Rodgers had in the pocket. He gets a while. He had 6 seconds on the play that we showed earlier. In this case, he's got about 4.5, but it's fairly easy. And like you're saying, DJ, it's not a matchup that you want, having Equanimeous St. Brown against Khalil Mack in coverage, but it's the matchup that Chuck Pagano leaned into because he just didn't really have an answer for the Packers' run game and the Packers' play action game and the Packers' man matchups, so he had to go to zone somewhere and tried to get crafty by dropping 8 into coverage as often as he could, but when he did that, the Bears' pass rush just couldn't match what the Packers were able to block, and Rodgers had all the time in the world. I don't think that there's any pair of plays then that end up, actually I've got 3 for you, defining this game better than the 3 that I'm about to show you. And this is a nice reminder that you're neither as bad nor as good as your last game in any capacity. I want you to keep your eye on Khalil Mack here, because on this 3rd and 4, Mack should have torn the play open, but he just doesn't quite get there due to the way the Packers are playing. See, he beats his matchup immediately, but because Danny Trevathan misses that tackle, Aaron Rodgers, I'll slow it down here, is able to squeeze out 2 yards and avoid what would technically have been a sack. That's about as clean as you can beat a human being. Khalil Mack is not playing badly. That's something I need to make as abundantly clear as I can. Khalil Mack is a very, very good football player and is about as good as any edge rusher in the game right now, whether it's Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, anybody. Khalil Mack is playing really well. So why isn't he producing? Well, part of it's because of his teammates. In this case, Trevathan's going to allow Rodgers to step up because there is a step-up lane. Mario Edwards is kind of giving away contain, but also partially because edge rushing just isn't as easy. It's not quite as productive as it has been in the past. The league seems to be kind of shifting towards, the league seems to kind of be shifting towards interior rushers. And because Rodgers is able to turn what would have been an 8-yard loss into a 2-yard gain, the Packers net 10 yards even when the Bears get what they want. And that was kind of a theme of this game, unfortunately, was that even the plays that the Bears could have had go their way just didn't. And a lot of it's because Aaron Rodgers was on his game. In this case, he recognizes the Khalil Mack pressure about as quickly as a human being can, steps right around it, as you can see right there, makes just enough of a move to beat a tackle and fall forward for 2 yards, and then the immediate play later here on 4th and 2, you're going to see him stay patient against what I believe is a play action. No, it's not play action, but I'll wind it back so you can see it. It's a really, unfortunately, nicely run play where, if memory serves, the running back over here is going to, gracious alive, mouse cursor, run across the field as the tight end circles across there. They're going to mesh at about this point with some over routes there, and Rodgers just stays patient. He knows he's got time in the pocket. The mesh happens over there with him he ends up freeing his man into this pocket of space, but Rodgers chooses instead to take his man in a one-on-one, and from there, Rodgers distributes, and the Packers pick up 14 yards on 4th and 2, which is a bummer. But so at this point, the Bears just kind of can't catch a break. Like, sure, some of it is that you could call some of it on holdings that aren't getting called. There's truth to that. But also, the Packers offense was just playing better than the Bears. And when Aaron Rodgers is out there in the middle of football games making plays like this, I just don't know what the solution is. Because even on this one, the Bears get exactly what they want in terms of a defensive matchup. This is a play-action pass in which immediately, normally the Packers have been scoring off this, but the Bears were able to defend it this time with Roquan Smith bearing down immediately on Rodgers. But then take a look at this. Like, Rodgers just makes a play with his feet and delivers to a wide-open Allen Lazard that gets totally lost in coverage. Let's back this up and slow it down. The motion's going to pull the whole Bears defense over to this side, but Rodgers keeps the play alive with his feet, even as Roquan Smith immediately recognizes and comes after him, because Allen Lazard over here just gets lost in defensive coverage, and Rodgers steps back about 8 yards, looks like a player out of NFL Blitz from back in the day, and boom, I mean, he delivers. What do you do? Like, how do you defend this? And as much as as much as some folks might say at this point, like, sure, maybe somebody needs to keep their eye on Lazard. It's also an end zone play, and I get that with all the commotion and all the movement here on the Packers sideline to shift this way, there's a whole lot of eyes watching for who's going to cut back against the grain, because that's what the Packers had been doing up to this point. Lazard, who is right here, sets a pick for his man, and similar to the Gabriel pick play that the Bears ran against Washington in 2019 last year, the Bears keep their eye on the guy getting picked for, and they lose the guy setting the pick as he just fades into that space. He's open. Rodgers makes a swiveling throw off his back foot, and bang. It's hard to watch because, again, like, the Bears definitely missed Akeem Hicks, but also Aaron Rodgers was an unfortunate reminder that when a Hall of Fame to be quarterback is on his game and his weapons are playing well, like Davante Adams, and the Bears pass rush just can't match what the Packers offensive line is able to deliver, there's not a lot of solutions on defense. And sure, maybe, Buster Skrine definitely ought to, or is going to be wanting to have had a better day, like, over the rest of this week. He's not going to look at he's not going to want to look at the film because he did not play well, but also that's because he got victimized by a guy who was victimizing everybody at will, and it hurt to watch. Because when I look at this Bears defense, I keep seeing a unit that Matt LaFleur just smoked schematically. The pass rush was slowed down by play action, and then when they came with 3 or even came with 5, they just couldn't hurry Rodgers like you'd want them to. And so instead, he was able to sit back and pick them apart with a running game that was able to, I swear, it was doing 6 to 8 yards per carry or 1. But yeah, I mean, like you're saying, Sam, Rodgers is playing at an MVP level, and at least on that night, he was as close to unstoppable as I think a quarterback can get. And Tom, you're not wrong. The defense kind of does go as Hicks goes. The biggest bummer about this, and the reason that I started out talking about defense instead of talking about offense like I know I usually do, is because I do think this set the tone for the team. I mean, as soon as the Packers were able to control the first 7.5 minutes and ended up in the end zone, like, what are the Bears going to do? Was the Bears' plan really to win a shootout with Green Bay? Because I think we can all agree that the Bears' offense isn't exactly shootout material, and as we saw throughout the rest of the game, they're not. So, as much as I